Good morning one more time. I'll probably say it at least one more time before it's over with, so be prepared. So just take this opportunity this morning, and if you are part of the Youth Search Committee, if you would please rise and stand, please, just for a moment. We obviously have a few that could not be here this morning. Hey, 2, 3, there we go. Thank y'all so much for your work, and I'll just go ahead and say that definitely David, who was unable to be here this morning, he's not feeling well. But also know that Miss Tawny certainly had a lot to say with this young man being here today as well. Robert, I know the days to come are certainly not going to be easy. I just want you to know, sir, that your church is behind you, in front of you, to the left, to the right, wherever you need us to be. You just need to let us know where that is, brother. So with all that being said, I do know and I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that our youth committee has unanimously chosen this young man, Mr. Cody Dowden, to be here and speak to us this morning in view of a call for our permanent part-time youth director position. Mr. Cody has been in ministry since about 2005, if I remember correctly. He is about 38 years old, which makes me just a couple of years older. So it makes me feel good. There's someone about that same age around there as well. So, and of course, many of you already know Miss Sarah. She's been here certainly before. And, I bet Connie's never met, and neither is Taryn, probably has never met Sarah a day in their lives, as she is Connie's niece and Taryn's cousin. So what a wonderful blessing it is. Life tends to come back around, doesn't it? So what a truly a blessing it is for you. I know, Mr. Cody, I'm not going to steal all of your mojo this morning, but he is currently a teacher at Port Arthur School District, and I'm going to step aside and let him tell you the rest this morning. So if you would, please join me in welcoming Mr. Cody Dowden to the pulpit this morning.
Thank you, Pastor. Well, good morning. Like Pastor Little said, my name is Cody Dowden. I was born in Bryan, Texas, September of 1983, and a week later I was adopted by my parents, Janice and Daryl Dowden of Nederland, Texas, where I grew up. I went to high school, all through school. So yes, I am a Nederland boy, but don't hold it against me. I've got support up here. Just a little bit about me growing up. I practically grew up in the church, like literally at church. Church was a huge part of my family going back generations. My grandmother was one of the founding members of the First Church of God in Port Arthur on Jimmy Johnson Boulevard. My mother was about a few months away from being one of the first members. We found a picture of their first Sunday, and my Aunt Mare Faith was in there, and I asked, well, where's Mom? And Mom pointed at my grandmother, says, right there in the belly. So church has been a huge part. On my dad's side, my grandfather, John Thomas Dowden, was in ministry for many years, I believe at First Baptist Church of Beauart Gardens before he passed. So it's been a part of our family for a very long time. I started off at First Church of God, Port Arthur, as going there as a child. But whenever I got into age group ministry, so about around first grade, First Church of God didn't have a really strong children's ministry, and so my parents started to look around for a church that would have that, and we settled on First Baptist Church of Nederland, which became my home church, again in the first grade. Whenever I got to third grade, the summer of 1993, something clicked in my head, and I understood finally that going to church didn't make me a Christian. Now, I had understood the idea of asking God into my life, and I'd even prayed what you might call the sinner's prayer a few times. Didn't really understand what I was talking about until that summer at Vacation Bible School, and it finally clicked, like someone turned on a light bulb. And I went to talk to the pastor of First Baptist at the time, Pastor Randy Rudisell, and I accepted Christ as my Savior at the tender age of 9 years old, just about to turn 10. I've lost my point. There we go. From that point on, very little changed as far as my day-to-day walk. Again, I grew up in church. I don't have one of those testimonies that, I fell away and this, that, and the other. I stayed very active. If there was something that a kid could be doing at church, I was doing it. Whenever I got into the youth group, I became even more active. I started to kind of find myself in who I was as a person at church, helping set up and tear down and things like that for our youth group. And that continued on until graduation. I graduated 2002 from Nederland High School. The top third of my class. I was very proud of that. Barely the top third of my class, but I'm still very proud of that. And I decided to go to Lamar University. And whenever I got there, me and a friend of mine decided that we wanted to continue on serving, or at least participating in ministry. And so we found the Baptist Student Ministry at Lamar University, headed up by Darren Ford. And this was both a blessing and a curse for me. It was a blessing in that I got to participate in ministry even further and wider reaching than I had been as a high school student. It was a curse in that the BSM had their own building, and in that building there were couches. And I would go into that building and sit on that couch and not go to class. This was not a good thing. I am a living, breathing embodiment, students, of do as I say, not as I do. I'll get to that in just a moment. So I continued to work with the Baptist Student Ministry. At the time, I kind of pulled away a little bit from First Baptist. There wasn't a whole lot in the college ministry there, so I found my college ministry at Lamar. In 2005, the BSM was very big on summer missions. They wanted you to participate in summer missions. So I decided the summer of 2005 that I was going to take that summer and go on a mission trip through the North American Mission Board. I ended up being placed in Mecklenburg County, Virginia. It is the largest county in Virginia, Southern Virginia, just on the North Carolina line, a little bit north of Raleigh. Now, I spent the summer there working with their Concord Baptist Association, primarily doing vacation Bible schools every week. There was also a camp there that we worked with in our free time. But I was staying with the pastor, Troy Hickman, of La Crosse Baptist Church in La Crosse, Virginia. And one night we were talking. I forget how we got to this point, but he shared with me what you might call his philosophy of ministry. And it was very, very simple. Love God, love people. Is a paraphrase of the final commands that Jesus gave to his disciples whenever he was talking to Peter. He says, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes." He says, "Feed my sheep." He says again, "Peter, do you love me?" Peter says, "Yes." "Feed my sheep." He says a third time, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter's like, "Yes." "Feed my sheep." Love God, love people. And then he looked at me and he said, "I see that in you." And that's where my path changed. I had been going to Lamar University as a history major. History was one of my only real interests. I didn't really want to pursue anything else, so I was going to be a teacher, a history teacher, because that's what you do with a history degree. I have nothing but the utmost respect for teachers. As Pastor Little was saying, I've actually just become a teacher kind of in a roundabout way. So I have even more respect now than I did just 4 weeks ago for teachers. But for me, it was something that I was going to do because that's what I had to do with a history degree. It was never so much of a calling that I would call it, as I would call it. Whenever Pastor Hickman said, "I see that in you," it opened my eyes to the idea of ministry as a career, as a vocation, as what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was the first time that I ever felt like there was something that I could do that I wanted to do. Every kid, I believe, finds themselves in something. Some kids are drama kids. Some kids are sports kids, band kids, the academic kids. I was in band. I was in academic decathlon. But I found myself at church. I was a church kid. I was there whenever the doors opened. I was there whenever the doors closed. The only thing that kept me from being there whenever they were closed is that I wasn't the preacher's kid. But that's where I found myself. And so the idea of being in ministry, of serving in the church, of being a part of growing God's kingdom, it was what I was supposed to do. I'd found that thing. Mark Twain said, "Find a job you enjoy doing, and you will never have to work a day in your life." This was my thing. This was what I wanted to do. Before I left on that mission trip, I had been going to a Bible study led by the pastor of Crossroads Fellowship Church over in Nederland, who had been my music minister since I got to First Baptist Nederland. His name is Pastor Carl Dowden. And Carl was holding a young adult Bible study at his house on Tuesday nights. And whenever I got back, I went back to that Bible study. And about that same time, he said, "I'm looking to build a youth ministry at Crossroads." He had just come on as the pastor that previous summer while I'd been away. "Would anyone like to help me?" Well, this just has to be God's timing, so I raised my hand. And that's how I became the youth minister at Crossroads Fellowship. It started off as a part-time position. It actually eventually became a volunteer position, but I've never considered doing anything else with my life. I started off in youth ministry because at the time I was closer to being a youth than I was an adult. Sarah would say that I'm still closer to being a youth than I am an adult. I figured I should minister to people that I relate to. But the more I went along with it, the more I understood the importance of youth ministry. My parents made sure that church was a part of my life. Whenever I was a senior in high school, whenever I approached graduation, the idea of not going to church never entered my mind. It was not a thought that I had. But I'm in the minority of that. Studies show the most optimistic statistics say that 75% of high school seniors leave the church and they don't come back until they have children of their own. That is 5 to 15 years conservatively of lost growth. I want to be a part of changing that. I want to be a part of reversing that statistic. I read that statistic around 2005. It's been 15 years. I looked it up again whenever I was writing this out, whenever I started my search for a full-time position, or at least my next position. I looked up this statistic again. 15 years, it has not changed. It is still the same. And that is crushing to me. Now, the question that I ask myself is, why was I so different? Why was it different for me? Because, I mean, obviously, I'm not the only kid that grew up in church, that, went to everything, that did everything. There are kids that I graduated with that one Sunday they were there, the next Sunday they weren't. It was that quick. What was the difference for me? And through this whole process, I finally figured it out. And the difference is I was active. I found something to plug into. I found something that I could take ownership of. And that's something that I want to instill in the students here, or wherever I end up serving, even further down the line. That is what I want my ministry to be marked as, by students who take ownership of the ministry. It's not just me, it's them. It's us. I want to be a part of an active, thriving, and growing ministry. I want to be a part of building the foundation of the church to come. Proverbs 22:6 says, start children off in the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. A healthy church starts with a strong foundation. That is what I want to be a part of doing. I don't believe in stripping down the word. I don't believe in shying away from difficult subjects. In fact, a friend of mine gave me a book one time that I've since lost, but I found another version of it. It was called The 7 Toughest Sayings of Jesus, and I went through a Bible study of that with my students. I want to be a part of challenging them. I want to challenge them to grow in their faith now, as opposed to waiting until they're challenged outside of our walls by someone else. See, I was lucky enough that I had a strong foundation at the BSM to help me whenever I felt challenged. They even challenged me themselves. If I'd had that sort of challenge beforehand, I can only imagine the kind of believer or the kind of Christian, the kind of effectiveness that I could have had. See, I think it is necessary to address the difficult subjects. And Lord knows our students are facing things that I never dreamed of in their lives right now. They are coming up against things that those of us that are my age and older would never have understood. We need to address those things. We need to show them, tell them, teach them why and how the way of Christ is so much better for them than what they are being offered outside of these walls. I believe in building relationships. That's who I am. I believe in getting to know people. I believe in investing in them. I believe that if we invest in people, that investment is returned. So if we invest in the lives of our students, they return that investment to us by participating, by growing, by forming the next generation of the church. I take time to get to know students in my ministry. I want to be involved in what they're involved in. Do you play a sport? Fantastic. When do you play? I'll be there. Are you in a play? Phenomenal. When is it going? When are you performing? I'll be there. Are you in band? Outstanding. Love band. Was in band myself. When can I come to a concert? I want to be a part of what they're doing because I'm asking them to be a part of what I'm doing. There was a gentleman whenever I was growing up. His name was Bob Drody. He was a Sunday school teacher at First Baptist Nederland. I knew him from the time I got into the youth group, but he became my Sunday school teacher whenever I was in 12th grade. And he always told us that if we needed anything, that we could call him. And but more importantly, he lived that out. He lived that out to a point that 10 years later, after I was out of his class, after I was even out of that church, 10 years later, in the midst of a personal crisis, he was my first call. That's the kind of influence that I want to have on our students. That's the kind of person that I want to be, someone that they know I'm with them, I'm behind them, I will support them. I was saying that I was not the best student, and I wasn't. Whenever I got home from Virginia, I still wasn't the best student. About that time, I met my lovely now wife, Sarah. Was it 2008? 2009. Don't tell her I forgot that. 2009. I knew that. Just seeing if you did. 2009, we met about 4 years after I got back. And at the time, again, I was not as successful at Lamar. So I ended up, I would say drop out. I stopped going because we got married. I started working full time, still ministering at Crossroads. I joined the workforce. I worked for about 10 years in the automotive industry. And about 2 years ago, I finally, God finally clicked in my mind that you need to take the next step. You are spinning your wheels where you are. You need to figure out where to go from there. I got my degree last fall from Liberty University in history. I started seminary, went to one semester. I've been to one semester of seminary, and then I got a position teaching at Thomas Jefferson Middle School, which is a story in and of itself. I'd be happy to let y'all know that if you would like. But I finally feel like it's time for me to take the next step, for me to take the next step in my ministry, and I really do hope that it's here. I do. Whenever we started looking at this next process, I've known this was coming for 15 years. Again, this has always been my goal since 2005 was full-time ministry. But the reality of looking for a ministry position is a lot different from talking about it. I want to serve our community. I want to serve where I know people. Because I think that's what God has called me to do. and I hope that it's here at Southside. Pastor.
Thank you, Brother Cody. And I'm once again glad to have you here with us here today. And once again, for everyone's knowledge, the search committee did vote unanimously, the entire group. And one more time, I'm sure I'm going to miss some of them, so help me, because I'm not very good at this. Tammy's probably, she's kind of thinking I'm going to miss them too, I can tell you that. But obviously, Tammy was the head of our search committee. She did a wonderful job, and of course, Brother David, who's unable to be here this morning because he's not a little under the weather. Also, Mr. Bruce right there, and then Mr. Robert and Miss Tawny and Stacy Silva, and Miss Jerry is also on the committee, and Crystal kind of in an indirect way of being on the committee as well. I'm sure, is there anyone that I am forgetting right off the top of my head? I believe that's all. So just remind everyone that it's an opportunity for you to know that also Mr. Cody is ordained into the Baptist ministry. So he comes with all the paperwork, so to speak. So with all that being said, thank you once more for coming and being a part. And as usual, at every service, we want to have an invitation. I think that's only proper, as invitations at the end of every service, especially on Sunday mornings, are needed. So if I could have my praise team come up. Invitation is simple this morning. If you don't know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, today may just be that day. If you can ever think back at a time in your life where you didn't have a change, where you can think back and go, man, or maybe it's a time where like Cody said, where it was maybe you recited the sinner's prayer when you were a teenager, but there was never no indirect relationship or change within your life. Maybe today is that day that you come and make that decision. If you're not a member of our church, you're certainly welcome to come down during this time and join our fellowship. We would love to have you. Crystal and I had always said that it was very difficult for us to find another church anywhere that has just treated us so much like family, and it's an opportunity for you here this morning if God so does lead you. Of course, the altar is always open as well for you. If you have any burdens to bear or you want to leave anything here at the altar this morning, it is certainly there open for you. If you would, please stand for a verse or so of invitation.